Okay, hi all. So today we are gonna continue with chapter 7, consumers, producers, and the efficiency of the markets. Okay. So in this chapter, we are gonna look at the answers for the following questions. What is the consumer surplus? How is it related to the demand curve? What is the producer surplus? How is it related to the supply curve? Do markets produce a desirable allocation of the resources, or could the market outcome be improved upon? So this is called as the welfare economics. Okay, so we're going to look at the consumers welfare. So what are the participants of the markets? Consumers and the firms welfare. Okay, recall the allocation of the resources refers to how much of each good is produced, which producers produce it, and which consumers consume it. Okay, welfare economics studies how the allocation of the resources affects economic well-being. First, we'll look at the well-being of the consumers. Okay, so well-being of the consumers will be measured by willingness to pay. Okay, each individual has some willingness to pay for each good he or she desires. Okay, for instance, consider you want to buy a bicycle. Okay, you have a second-hand bicycle, let's say. Okay, one of your friends in the dormitory is selling and you want to buy it. Okay, and then you see the bicycle, then you have a valuation for it, which is hidden by you. Okay, you don't tell the seller, okay, I'm gonna pay this maximum. Okay, even the bargaining situations, people may say that, okay, I'm gonna pay this much at the end. Okay, final bid for the good is this, they say. Okay, for the bargaining, but this may be below their valuation. We may not know their true valuations. Okay, because we are going to measure the surplus from the difference between willingness to pay and the price. Okay, so a buyer's willingness to pay for a good is the maximum amount the buyer will pay for that good. Okay, so even in the bargaining situation with the seller, a buyer may say that this is maximum I will pay for this good. It may be below their true valuation. Okay, we don't know. Willingness to pay measures how much the buyer values the good. Suppose we have the following example. Okay, there are 4 people. Okay, actually, these are the players of the Red Hot Chili Peppers. The book says. Okay, Anthony, Chad, Flea, and John. Okay, willingness to pays are reported for these guys. Okay, for an iPod. And if price of iPod is $200, who will buy an iPod? In other words, what's the quantity demanded? Okay, so if the price of iPod is 200, the people who has willingness to pay above 200 will buy, right? But if their willingness to pay is below 200, they're not gonna buy it. Who are the ones who which has willingness to pay below 200? Chad and John. Okay, Chad and John will not pay it because this price is above what they are willing to pay. Okay, Antonia and Flea will buy. Okay, and Chadana will not. Hence, quantity demanded will be 2 when price is 200. Okay, now this was an example, but we can derive the demand curve for all price levels. Okay, let's do that now. So try to do it by yourself first. So what is we have Flea who has the maximum willingness to pay in here, right? So if the price is above Flea's willingness to pay, above 300, nobody wants to buy it, right? So demand will be 0. Okay. If the price is between Anthony's willingness to pay and Flea's willingness to pay, only Flea will wants to buy it. Okay, quantity demanded will be 1. Okay, If the prices between Chad's willingness to pay and Anthony's willingness to pay, okay, only Filia and Anthony will be willing to pay, which is going to make quantity demanded to 2. Okay, so our example was in this interval between 176 and 250. If the prices between John's willingness to pay and Chet's willingness to pay, then 3 of them will buy it. Quantity demanded will be 3. And if the price is below 125, everybody will buy it. Quantity demanded will be 4. Okay, so let's draw now. So these are the prices. On the y-axis, you see the prices. Okay, if the price is above 301, no one will buy it. Q equals 0 in here. If prices between 251 and 300, quantity demanded will be 1. If prices between 176 and 250, quantity demanded will be 2. If we are in the third case, if prices between 126 and 175, quantity demanded will be 3. If price is below 125, quantity demanded will be 4. Okay, these switch a little bit. Okay, so this is 4. Okay, so about the staircase shape. Okay, so it is a little bit different than the demand curve we did up to now, right? So in our case, demand curve was linear, but this is like staircase. Okay, so there are 4 steps and 1 per buyer. Okay, so why we have this? Because each buyer has a different valuation for the good, different willingness to pay for the good. Okay, if two of them has the same willingness to pay, then we would have 3 different staircases. Or if 3 of them have the same willingness to pay, then we are going to have 3 goods will be demanded in one case and two staircase in that case. But if there are many buyers in the market who have different willingness to pay, you are going to have these staircases with small changes. Okay, if there were a huge number of buyers, as in the competitive market, there would be a huge of very tiny steps, and it would look like a smooth curve. Okay, as we did in the class, like linear demand curve. Okay. At any Q, the height of demand curve is willingness to pay of the marginal buyer, and the buyer who would leave the market if price were any higher. This is Filia's willingness to pay. This is Anthony's willingness to pay. This is Chet's willingness to pay, and this is John's willingness to pay. Marginal means what? If you increase the price just 1, he's gonna leave the market. Okay. So consumer surplus, how are we going to measure the consumer surplus? You're going to look at the difference between willingness to pay and the price paid for the good. Okay, consumer surplus is the amount a buyer is willing to pay minus the amount a buyer actually pays. Okay, so willingness to pay minus price. So let's calculate consumer surplus for these guys. If the price is 260, if the price is 260, who's gonna buy the good? Only Filia, right? So only Filia is gonna buy the good, and his surplus, consumer surplus, will be what? His willingness to pay 300 minus the price of the good, 260. Then consumer surplus will be 40. Okay, the others get no consumer surplus because they do not buy the good. Okay, total consumer surplus will be the 40. Okay. Okay, so only she will buy it. Okay. Now suppose price is 220 now. Okay. So let's turn back to let's turn back to the picture again. Sorry. Okay, sorry. Okay, in the willingness to pay picture. Okay, okay. If it is 220, who's gonna buy the good? Okay, Anthony's willingness to pay is above the price, and Filia's willingness to pay is above the price. So Anthony and Filia will buy the good. What is the consumer surplus for Filia? Consumer surplus of Filia is 300 minus 220, which is 80. And Anthony's consumer surplus will be what? 250 minus 220, which is 30. You are going to sum 80 and 30, which is 110. Okay. So let's look at the case in here. If it is 220, as I said, Filia's consumer surplus is 80. And you're going to add Anthony's consumer surplus, which is 30. And total consumer surplus will be 110. Okay. So the lesson from this is what? Total consumer surplus equals the area under the demand curve and above the price from 0 to Q. Okay. So if you have consumer surplus with lots of buyers with a linear demand curve, okay, what are you going to have? Suppose this is your demand curve. At Q equals 5, the marginal buyer is willing to pay for 50. Okay, suppose the price is 30, then his consumer surplus is 20. Okay, and then consumer surplus is the area between price and the demand curve. Okay, from 0 to Q. Okay, so if the price is 30, the demand at that price is 15, you are going to calculate this area, the consumers who had, so demand curve is showing you this. This part, this blue shaded area represents the consumer surplus of the consumers who has willingness to pay above 30. Okay, recall area of triangle equals 1/2 times base times height. Okay, height is 30, so consumer surplus will be 1/2 times 15 times 30, 225. Okay, how a higher price reduces the consumer surplus? If price rises to 40, okay, then you're gonna have your consumer surplus as 100. Okay, so it dropped from 225 to 100. There are two reasons for the fall in the consumer surplus. First, fall in the consumer surplus due to buyers leaving the market. Okay, so before the price increase, these guys, consumers who have willingness to pay between 30 and 40 were able to buy it when the price was 30. Okay, if it is 40, they are not going to be able to buy it. Okay, this straight lines area with the blue straight lines belong to that. Okay, these consumers will not be able to buy. And second, this is due to fall in the consumer surplus due to remaining buyers paying higher P. Okay, so remember when we were calculating the consumer surplus, we were subtracting P for each willingness to pay. Okay, before we were subtracting 30, now we are going to subtract 40, and this is the number of units sold after the price increase. Okay, now let's do an example. Find the marginal buyer's willingness to pay at Q equals 10. At Q equals 10, it is 30, right? Find consumer surplus when price is 30. 40 minus 30, so this is the height, times 10 divided by 2. Okay, and suppose price falls to 20. Price falls to how much consumer surplus will increase due to buyers entering the market and existing buyers paying a lower price. Okay, this is the inverse of what we saw earlier. Okay, so this is what we already said. Okay, and if it falls to 20, okay, this triangle belongs to the buyers, additional buyers who weren't able to buy when the price was 30. Now they are able to buy when the price is 20. This part is coming from the additional buyers, and this green part is coming from the increase in consumer surplus, in which existing buyers are paying lower P. Okay, so now let's look at the producer side, cost and supply curve. Cost is the value of everything a seller must give up to produce a good. Okay, so this is including the opportunity cost. Includes cost of all resources used to produce good, including value of the seller's time. Okay, example, costs of 3 sellers in the lawn cutting business, okay, are like this. So we have Jack, Janet, and Chrissy, and they have the following costs: 10, 20, and 35. A seller will produce and sell the good and service only if the price exceeds her or his cost. Okay, if hence cost is a measure of willingness to sell. Okay. Now let's derive the supply schedule from the cost data. If the price is between 0 and 9, nobody is willing to sell, right? Because the minimum cost among these 3 guys is 10, okay? If price is between 0 and 9, it's not enough to cover any of the cost of any of these guys, okay? So quantity supplied is 0. If the cost is between 10 and 19, quantity supplied, who's going to supply? Only Jack will supply. Okay, quantity supplied will be 1. Okay, if the price is between 20 and 34, so both Janet and Jack will supply. Quantity supplied will be 2. And if the price is above 35, all of them will supply. Okay, so let's draw now. If the price is below 10, quantity supplied is 0. If it is between 10 and 19, quantity supplied will be 1. If it is between 20 and 34, quantity supplied will be 2. And then it's 3. Okay. This is like this. Okay. Then we are finding the equilibrium price by intersecting those demand and supply curves, as we did for the equations. Okay, you can do this with the step functions as well. I'm going to show you during the class. Okay, at each Q, the height of S curve is the cost of the marginal seller, the seller who would leave the market if the price were any lower. Okay, so this is Jack cost. If the price is, instead of 10, if it is 9, he's going to leave the market. Okay, Janet cost, and this is Chris's cost. Okay, producer surplus. How are you going to find producer surplus? Producer surplus is the amount a seller is paid for a good minus the seller's cost. This is what he obtained from the sale, right? So suppose the price is 25. If the price is 25, both Jack and Janet will be able to cover their cost, and they will be willing to sell their goods. Okay, Jack's producer surplus will be what? 25 minus 10, which is 15, and Janet's producer surplus will be what? 25 minus 25. The sum of producer surplus will be 20. Okay, 20. So total producer surplus equals to the area above the supply curve and the price from 0 to Q. Okay, so for the general supply curve, so this is price per pair. This is quantity for the pairs of shoes. Suppose the price is 40. Sorry, It's showing, the graphs are shifting a little bit while I'm showing you. At Q equals 15, the marginal seller cost is 30, okay? And her producer surplus is 10, okay, if the price is 40, okay? Now, producer surplus is the area between price and the supply curve. So this is the pink area. So the height of this is 15 and the base is 25. So it's going to be 1/2 times 25 times 25. Okay. So if the price falls to 30, okay, so producer surplus will be this yellow triangle now. And there are two reasons. So it fell down as well. There are two reasons for the fall in the producer surplus. Okay. Some of the sellers who were willing to sell when the price was higher, now they are not gonna sell. Okay. So this is the fall in the producer surplus due to sellers leaving market, and this rectangle, green rectangle, will be fall in the producer surplus due to remaining sellers getting a lower P. Okay, so find marginal seller's cost at Q equals 10, okay, which is 20. Find total producer surplus for price equals to 20. 20 times 10 divided by 2, 100, right? So I'm going to come to the, if the price rises to 30, find increase in producer surplus due to selling 5 additional units. Okay, now at price 30, quantity supplied will be 15, and getting a higher price on the initial 10 units. Okay, at Q equals 10, marginal cost is 20, and producer surplus was 100 as we calculated. If P rises to 30, now quantity supplied will be 15, and producer surplus on additional units, so additional sellers who are added to the market, is 25, and increase in producer surplus on initial 10 units, in other words, initial suppliers, is 100. Okay, consumer surplus, producer surplus, and total surplus. So consumer surplus is value to buyers minus amount paid by the buyers, which is the price. And so this is buyers' gain from participating in market. And producer surplus is the amount received by the sellers, which is price, minus cost to the sellers. Okay, so this is the seller's gain from participating to the market. Okay, total surplus is the sum of those. Okay, so this amount paid by the buyers and amount received by the sellers are the same, which is the price. They will cancel out, and total surplus will be what? Value to the buyers minus cost to the sellers. Okay, so this is the total gains from trade in a market. Okay, so the market's allocations of the resources in a market economy, the allocation of the resources are decentralized and determined by the interactions of many self-interested buyers and sellers. Okay, is the market's allocation of resources desirable, or would a different allocation of resources make society better off? To answer this, we use a total surplus as a measure of society's well-being, and we consider whether the market's allocations is efficient. Okay, policymakers also care about equality, though our focus on here is the efficiency. Okay, so efficiency is total surplus value to the buyers minus cost to the sellers. An allocation of the resources is efficient if it maximizes total surplus. Okay, total surplus was defined as this. Efficiency means the goods are consumed by the buyers who value them highly, and the goods are produced by the producers with the lowest costs. Raising or lowering the quantity of a good wouldn't increase the total surplus. Okay, so only there are two measures for the efficiency. The goods are consumed by the buyers who value them highly. Okay, the goods are produced by the producers with the lowest cost. Why? Because total surplus positively affected by the valuation of the buyers and negatively affected by the cost of the sellers, right? So now evaluating the market equilibrium, okay? Suppose this is the market equilibrium when price is 30 and quantity is 15,000, okay? So consumer surplus is the area of the triangle above 30 and the demand curve, and producer surplus is the area of the triangle below 30 and the supply curve. Okay, so this is consumer surplus, this is producer surplus, and it is maximized at this equilibrium level. We are going to show it. Okay, is the market equilibrium efficient? Yes. Okay, so which buyers consume the good? Okay, every buyer whose valuation, willingness to pay, is above 30 will buy. Okay, and every buyer whose willingness to pay below 30 will not. Okay, so the buyers who value the good most highly are the ones who consume it. From the supply side, which sellers produce the good? Every seller whose cost is below $30 will produce the good, and every seller whose cost is above 30 will not. Okay, so the sellers with the lowest cost produce the good. Okay, so these were the two conditions for the efficiency, right? So we are having it when we have when we calculate the total surplus according to the competitive equilibrium. So does equilibrium Q maximize total surplus? Okay, at Q equals 20, the cost of producing the marginal unit is 35, and the value to the consumers is 20. Okay, hence one can increase total surplus by reducing Q. There's a reduction in the total surplus due to valuation is lower than the cost of production. Okay, so this is true any Q which is above 15. Okay, so if the production happens above the equilibrium level, so there may be gain by reducing the production level, reducing Q. How about producing at a level which is below the equilibrium? At Q equals 10, the cost of producing the marginal unit is 25, and value to the consumers of marginal unit is 40. Okay, so value is higher than the cost, and it may continue to be so until 15. So it is possible to increase total surplus by producing more. Okay, hence it's possible to increase total surplus by increasing Q. This is true for any Q less than 15. Okay, so the market equilibrium quantity maximized total surplus. So we showed that by looking at the Q above market equilibrium, Q below the market equilibrium. At any other quantity can increase total surplus by moving towards the market equilibrium quantity. Okay, so this is Adam Smith. Okay, he's a famous guy in economics. He lived in the 18th century. So he says that, so these are quotations from his book, From the Wealth of Nations. Man has almost constant occasion the help of his brethren, and it's vain for him to expect it from their benevolence only. He will be more likely to prevail if he can interest their self-love in his favor and show them that it is for their own advantage to do for him what he requires of them. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their interest. In other words, they are not doing these jobs for us, okay? They are doing these jobs for their own self-interest, but it's okay, okay? Every individual neither intends to promote the public interest, nor knows how much he's promoting it. He intends only his own gain. He is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand to promote an end which was no part of his intention. nor is it always the worst for the society that it was no part of it. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that of the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. Okay, even so, actually, we can run an experiment, a market experiment when we meet. Okay, I can give you the cost values for some of them and make them seller in the market. Okay, and give some values to some of you as buyers. Okay, and ask you to trade an imaginary good for an imaginary good. I ask you to give prices for the imaginary good, and of course everybody wants to make a profit. Okay, make a profit. We will check whether we are gonna obtain the equilibrium level. Okay, let's do that and do it in the class when we meet. Okay, so free market versus government intervention. The market equilibrium is efficient. No other outcome achieves higher total surplus. Government cannot raise total surplus by changing the market's allocation of resources. So there's a term, laissez-faire, French for allow them to do. Okay, the notion that government shouldn't interfere with the market. Okay, suppose resources were allocated by the market, but by a central planner who cares about society's well-being. Okay, to allocate resources efficiently and maximize total surplus, the planner would need to know every seller's cost and every buyer's willingness to pay for every good in the entire economy. Is it possible? There are many buyers, there are many sellers. This is impossible. And why centrally planned economies are never very efficient. So conclusion, this chapter used welfare economics to demonstrate one of the 10 principles. Markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. And important note, we derive these lessons assuming perfectly competitive markets. In other conditions we will study in later chapters, the market may fail to allocate resources efficiently. Such market failures occur when a buyer or seller has a market power. This means that the ability to affect the market price. In the competitive market, we are assuming that there are many buyers and there are many sellers, and none of them has a power to affect the market price. Okay, so all of their interaction determines the price, and we are looking at how they are affecting from this price. And transactions have side effects. These are called as externalities that affect bystanders. Suppose this pollution. Okay, so firms produce, but as a side effect, pollution occurs. Okay, we will use welfare economics to see how public policy may improve on the market outcome in such cases. Despite the possibility of market failure, the analysis in this chapter applies in many markets, and the invisible hand remains extremely important. Okay. So additionally, we saw what is willingness to pay, how to calculate the consumer surplus. The height of demand curve reflects the value of goods, value of the good to buyers, their willingness to pay for it. Consumer surplus is the difference between what buyers are willing to pay for a good and what they actually pay. On the graph, consumer surplus is the area between price and the demand curve. Similarly, the height of supply curve is the seller's cost of producing the good. Sellers are willing to sell if the price they get is at least as high as their cost. Producer surplus is the difference between what sellers receive for a good and their cost of producing it. Okay, on the graph, producer surplus is the area between price and supply curve. Okay, to measure the society's well-being, we use total surplus, the sum of consumer surplus and producer surplus. And efficiency means that total surplus is maximized. that the goods are produced by the sellers with the lowest cost and they are consumed by the buyers who has the highest valuation for them. Under perfect competition, the market outcome is efficient. Altering it would reduce the total surplus. Okay, so let's meet in the other class.